A Shalom Akim Shalom Shalom. All praises, glory, and honor to Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem Rakakwadash, double honors to the apostles and the elders, great millstone, for teaching us his truth, and citations to the sincere Akim and Aquath and listen. May the blessing of election be upon your house. My name is Brother Requai. I'm back in here with another quick and Lord's will is always an edifying lesson. And for today's lesson, I kind of just wanted to discuss a little bit about bread, how our bread is defiled, and what exactly happens, right? And essentially, we're living in a time where a lot of the foods that we eat they don't have the nutritional components as it should, like back in the ancient times. There's a vast difference because we know we live in a time where we have essentially an unrighteous ruler ruling over us, where because he's a base man, he does base things, he creates base things, right? So it's not in him to do upright. As a matter of fact, let me go to this first precept here. Just bear with me. Let me just look for it. As a matter of fact, let me just actually. Okay, I'm gonna go to. Okay, where is it? This is Sirach, the 10th chapter, verse 1, and it says, "A wise judge will instruct his people, and the government of a prudent man is well ordered. As the judge of the people is himself, and so are his officers, and what manner of man the ruler of the city is, such are all they that dwell therein." Verse 3 is the point. And it says, "An unwise king destroyeth his people, but through the prudence of them which are in authority, the city shall be inhabited." Right? So this is what happens when you live under an unwise king. He is destroying the people. One of the manners I just wanted to discuss today is through the manner of the food, right? So we're going to specifically touch upon bread, and Lord's will, as always, this will be edifying. So I just wanted to read. So on the screen here, you see an image. Essentially what it is an anatomy of a grain. So it says a grain is considered to be whole, a whole grain containing these three parts. So on the three parts you see on the screen here, you see the bran, and then you see the germ, and then you see the endosperm that are all present, right, in the growing of the grain in the fields, right? So this is all present. This is why it's called whole grain, right? So a grain is supposed to have all these three components. So here, I'm just going to read a little bit of this article here, and then just, expound a little bit. And then, hopefully this lesson will be edifying, just right. So the bran here, so the bran is the outside portion of the grain, right? So it says the bran is the multi-layered outer skin for the edible kernel. It contains the important antioxidants, B vitamins, and fiber, right? So the germ is this portion you see under it, right? So the germ is the embryo, which has the potential to sprout into a new plant. So think of it kind of like a seed in a sense, right? So it says it contains many B vitamins, some protein, and minerals, and healthy fats, right? So the endosperm, which it comprises of the primary portion of the grain itself, it says the germ's food supply, which provides essential energy to the young plants so it can send roots down for water and nutrients, then sprouts up for sunlight's photosynthesizing power. The endosperm is by far the largest portion of the kernel. It contains the starchy carbohydrates, proteins, and small amount of vitamins and minerals, right? So where do we get, how is our bread defiled? As the scriptures say, our bread shall be defiled. I'll get that in a second. Let me just cover this real quick here. So what is the difference between the refined grain and an enriched grain? So it says refined is a term used to refer to grains that are not whole because they are missing one of the more key parts. So the three parts I just read earlier, the bran, the germ, and the endosperm. It says white flour and white rice are refined grains, right? So essentially, a refined grain is missing one of these three components, right? So it says white flour and white rice are refined grains. For instance, both have had their bran and germ removed, right? So here you see on the screen the bran, so the outside portion, right? And then the bottom portion here, those portions in a refined grain are taken out. So what you're left with now, you're left with the endosperm, which is primarily consists of your carbohydrates, right? So further on, it reads here, leaving only the endosperm, right? So refined grain removes about a quarter of the protein in the grain and two and half of 2/3 or more of a score of nutrients, leaving the grain a mere shadow of its original self. So you have essentially, and this is such a, and it's crazy what Esau does when you think about it, because refined kind of, when you go into the, as a matter of fact, let me search it up, because he's a, Esau is a wordsmith, right? So let's go to the word refine real quick. Bear with me. So, okay, refine in the etymology means to bring, reduce to a pure state or a condition of purity as full as possible, right? So it says, what else? It says delicate, make fine, right? So it's supposed to be to a close condition of purity or as full as possible. So what's happening is the actual opposite. That's what he's doing. So when you see products that have like refined flour or refined grains or refined rice or whatever it is like that, that's not good. He's playing with your words, because Esau, as the scriptures say, his words are smoother than and let me get it. Let me get it. I just want to get all of that meat. What's that? Psalms 55. What's that? 21. And it says Psalms 55 verse 21, and it says the words of his mouth was smoother than butter, but war is in his heart. But his words are softer than oil, but yet they drawn swords. So this is the way Esau fights. He messes the word. He's very, very clever and crafty with his words, right? That's why the apostles always talk about, looking up words and so on and so forth, right? To get a better understanding of what is actually being conveyed here, right? So when you see refined on its products, it is not actually what it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be close to that pure state. So, but that's not what's happening with the grains, right? So this is why, as a matter of fact, let me just read this and I'll get Ezekiel in a second. So it says, since the late 1800s, with new milling technology, allowed the bran and the germ to be easily and cheaply separated from the endosperm. Most of the grains around the world have been eaten as refined grains. This quickly led to disastrous and widespread nutrition problems like the deficiency diseases, it says pellagra and beriberi. Now, hold on. Okay, so I just wanted to look this up real quick because I actually don't know what pellagra is. It says pellagra is a systemic disease caused by severe deficiency of niacin. So niacin is also known as vitamin B3. It affects the whole body and eventually can lead to death. Primarily, pellagra is caused by a lack of niacin in your diet, right? So now you're starting to see the consequences of what happens when you don't have the proper nutrients in your diet, right? So here it says beriberi. It's beriberi is a thiamine deficiency, a medical condition of low levels of thiamine, also known as vitamin B1. Severe and chronic form is known as beriberi, right? So essentially, these how would you call those? These diseases, right? These diseases are merely caused by a lack thereof certain nutrients in the food because of that process that Esau through these different companies take forth and put forth, and they sell it cheaply to the people, right? Making lots of yield, making lots of profit, but he puts the profit over the people, right? So this is one of the consequences of living under an unwise king, like I read earlier, right? So as a matter of fact, let me go to Ezekiel before I forget, because you see that the one of the detrimental effects of living under an unwise king is the type of food that that we eat, right? And it's showing you a plethora of different problems which occur after the fact that it's eaten, because Esau is a man that is not upright, as it says in Habakkuk. And because of that, what's happening is it leads to other problems, other detrimental effects, a loss in stature, a loss in strength, a loss in mental strength, physical strength, all these different areas that is actually needed for you to properly develop as individuals. These things are not found in the food anymore because of the processes, because of the type of people who are ruling, right? So it says, Ezekiel 4:13, and it says that the Lord Yahweh Bashmashai said, even thus shall the children of Israel eat their defiled bread amongst the Gentiles, whither I will drive them. So because we got taken into slavery on ships, and now we've essentially been in Babylon the Great, aka America, one of the consequences of being in this captivity is the type of food that we are subject to, the type of food that we have to go to our nations, these other nations, for the want of all things. Let me get Deuteronomy. Let me just get that real quick. Deuteronomy 28, verse 48, and it says, therefore shall thou serve thine enemies. It says, which the Lord Yahweh Bashmashai shall send against thee in hunger and in thirst and in nakedness and in the want of all things. And he shall put a yoke of iron upon thy neck until he have destroyed thee. So this is one of the consequences of the curses. We have to go to these nations for the want of all things, right? So let me just continue reading on here. Okay, so in response, many governments recommended or required that refined grains be quote unquote enriched. So enriched simply means, so you might also see this in your grocery store when you're shopping. So something to also look out for. Enrichment adds back the fewer than half a dozen of the missing nutrients and does so in proportions different than they originally existed. So enriched basically means it has the nutrients that it's supposed to have. It's now being added back into that particular grain, whatever that grain is. So it says the better solution is to simply eat whole grains. Now that we more fully understand their huge health advantages, right? So it's supposed to have a number of health advantages to have it in just the way it is. But so Esau is so backwards that he tampers with it, and now it's causing a plethora of different problems down the road for you people, right? So here is just showing like a chart, right? And pretty much the chart, it's basically showing the different in nutrients when you eat the whole grains versus when you eat the refined wheat flour or the enriched wheat flour. So if you're looking and trying to switch up your diet, and you use a lot of like flour and so on and so forth, the best portion is to actually get the whole wheat, because then you get those different nutrients, right? You get those different nutrients for your body. You get so here it says the vitamin E, B6, magnesium, thiamine, which is the B1. The riboflavin is B2, niacin is B3. The fiber, that's another portion too. A lack of fiber. The potassium, iron, folate, and protein. So a lot of these nutrients are missing because of the refining process that these people, these companies, these are what it does to the food itself. And these foods are very, very important to life, right? So let me go to real quick. Just bear with me on this. Let me just look for something. Okay, this is the book of Ecclesiasticus 39, verse 26. And it says, the principal things for the whole use of man's life are water, fire, iron, and salt, and flour of wheat, honey, milk, and the blood of the grape, and oil, and clothing. So all these different things, when you think about it, in some way, shape, or form, are all been tampered with, right? So, for the today, considering what we're discussing today, the wheat has been tampered. We also know that the salt also has been tampered because it's been stripped. When you see table salt, it's been heated so much where it's stripped of the essential nutrients that you're supposed to have. Those different, you normally get your magnesium and other trace minerals that are also included, right? So, what else does it say? It says, verse 27, all these things are good to the godly, so to sinners they are turned to evil, right? So these things that are principal uses of our life, we're supposed to have these things. We're supposed to have these different nutrients, in order to actually be able to function, right? But this is one of the consequences of also why we need a savior, because we're in a condition where you don't have all the nutrients, you don't have all the proper benefits. You're not reaping the benefits of your food, so to speak, right? We're reaping very, very essentially little, Okay, let's go to because bread is something that is extremely, important. I remember there was an account, it was used to actually, feed Elijah, in the midst of I think it was a dearth, if I'm not mistaken, right? Let me go to, just bear with me on this. Like, bread is such a major portion of our culture. Right, this is Matthew 12. I'll start at verse 1 and I'll just read down, and it says, and at that time Yahushua went on to the Sabbath day through the corn, and his disciples were hungry and began to pluck the ears of the corn and to eat. But when the Pharisees saw it, they said unto him, behold, thy disciples do that which is not lawful to do upon the Sabbath day. And he said unto them, have you not read what David did when he was hungered, and they that were with him, how he entered into the house of the Most High, and did eat the showbread, which was not lawful for him to eat, neither for them which were with him, but only for the priests, right? So they were kind of getting on him, them for, doing something which was quote unquote, unlawful on the Sabbath day. But Yahushua was explaining, David was in a situation where he had to eat, the showbread. I think it was the priest named Ahimelech that gave him the showbread, because there was no other bread. There was no common bread, but there was the holy bread, which was only for essentially the priests, right? But so it's just to show you one thing, that bread was a major portion and a major part of our culture, right? It was also used, like I was referring earlier, with the example with Elijah, was shown in different modes of hospitality, extending hospitality, so to speak, right? It was a major portion of our culture, the way we conducted ourselves in the ancient times, right? And it shows you, and another thing, this account also shows you why we need mercy, right? That's why Isaiah talks about the mercies of David, because look at the way we eat right now, and this is just bread as an example. And there was an Instagram video I was watching, and it was comparing the food, the bread from the western portion of the world versus the eastern portion, like like more European countries. And when you look at the ingredients on the bread that is made in the western portion of the world, it has a plethora of different ingredients. You can't even pronounce them. You have something to keep the bread, whitened. You have something to keep the breads, certain texture and all these different. As a matter of fact, let me just look it up real quick. I think one of them was called, hold on. Okay, so this is sodium bromate. It says the introduction of bromate, a compound containing bromine and oxygen, changed baking, functioning as a food additive, enhances dough quality, and increases the volume of baked goods. It plays a vital role in improving the texture and volume of bread and other baked items. So here it says excessive use of, hold on. Let me see. So, Esau puts these different, things to actually quote unquote improve the flour. Essentially, oh, just here it says it may cause cancer. Oh, I'm sorry, that says potassium bromate, right? But is the point really is that, oh, hold on. Uh, okay. So I just looked it up. Sodium bromate is toxicologically equivalent to potassium bromate, which has prohibited since March 2011 due to its carcinogenic potential and assessed by the government of Canada's chemical management. So they imagine that, you have something that's in your bread that is causing a plethora of different effects on your body, right? So here it says vomiting, diarrhea, stomach pain, and restlessness. It also says high exposure may cause fluid to build up in the lungs, shortness of breath. That's pretty much it. But it shows you that, going back to the precept I just read, that we need a savior. We need someone to kind of to intervene from this, because as Hawashai said, as a matter of fact, I'll end off with that. Hold on. Is that 22? No, that's 24. I'm sorry. What's that? 20. Okay, this is Matthew 24 and 22, and it says, and except those days be shortened, they shall no flesh be saved, but for the elect's sake, those days shall be shortened, right? So we're in a situation where, we need a savior, right? Look at the way, and this is just bread I'm speaking of. There's multiple different foods and multiple different channels where Esau gets us, right? He causes certain things to, whether it could be the weather, just multiple different facets. He comes at you, right, with other different whether it's chemical warfare, wordsmith warfare, I should say, excuse me. You get your children in the schools, like you're essentially we're being attacked on every side. But our people, they're so far gone and their senses are so dull to the point where they don't even see and realize that they're being attacked on all sides, right? So, um, I guess I've rambled on quite a long bit, but I sincerely prayed and hope, this lesson was actually, edifying and actually brings more. As a matter of fact, I'll end off with this precept. I know, okay, last one, I swear. Uh, this is, one second. This is Sirach 13 and 14, and it says, "Better is the poor being sound and strong of constitution than a rich man that is afflicted in his body. Health and good estate is above of body is above all gold, and strong body above infinite wealth." Right. So, you know, although we're in this condition, we can make certain changes to the way we actually, improve ourselves and our families and those who actually, are believers and hearken, right, to actually, make a difference, right? There's no point in having a lot of money stored up and, essentially you don't actually, put it to good use to actually use, and essentially what you're really doing is using wisdom to actually better your temple, right? There's no point in having, all a bunch of, a ton of money, and then, your temple's all messed up, man. Your body's all, aches and pains and so on and so forth, and you can't actually enjoy the, so-called, I guess, carnal substances that you have, right? So anyways, that's pretty much it. But just something to look out for, just to recap: refined and enriched, right? Stripped of its nutritional content and refined. Essentially, they put the nutrients back into it, right? But it's not in its purest state. So it's better off to find something that is more whole grain, whether it's the flour or in different baking goods that you'd use, right? If you're looking, or if you have a woman that does a lot of baking, whole grain is the best way to go, right? So, anyways, hopefully, this video was edifying. Just like to give all praises, glory, and honor to Yahweh Bashim Shai. Until next time, I say Shalom.